Hey there, welcome to a lesson with Artsy Rose. Today we're going to be using those watercolor paints that we made in a previous video. So if you didn't see it, make sure and check out our previous video on how to make watercolor paints. These are just out of Crayola markers that did not work so well on paper anymore. We poured a little bit of water into the bottom of the cup, or if you have a container with a lid, that's even better. And then we took the lids off the markers and dropped them in. You can even mismatch colors a little bit to make your own colors, like the light green and the dark green. And then from here, we're going to now use these colors to our new liquid watercolors to make our own artwork, our own painting. So I have a piece of watercolor paper. The heavier the pound on the paper, the better. So for example, this is 90-pound paper, and if you can go even heavier than that, then your paper is less likely to curl. 140-pound paper is great. Now, why they call it that, I don't exactly know, because it doesn't literally hold a 140-pound person, but it's all water weight, I suppose. So anyway, if you don't have watercolor paper, you could use maybe construction paper. It's a little bit thicker. Tag board, cardstock, any of those kinds of things are a little bit thicker. If you have to use copy paper, that's fine. It'll just get kind of wrinkly on you. After it dries, lay a heavy book on top and it'll flatten it right back out. So let's get started. You're going to need some sort of paper. You're going to want something to draw with, preferably a pencil, and because you can erase mistakes if you have any oopsies. And then Sharpie, if you want to be able to trace your pencil lines. You could even try a resist technique using some oil pastels. These are Crayola, or crayons work great too. And then watercolor paint. If you don't have your own watercolor paints that you made, you can always use the watercolor paints that are in the tray or the tubes, of course. So I am going to draw a chameleon that changes colors today. So I'm going to start with the head over here to the right side of the paper, and then it's going to work its way around and its little tail is going to curl up. Eventually I'll put a branch underneath it. So I'm going to start with a curved line that sort of dips forward like that. So it starts as like a frowny face curve, goes down the slide, and then curves down. Parents, anytime that you can offer your kids lines and shapes versus saying just draw this, break down whatever it is that they're drawing into lines and shapes, that will help them significantly. So I am then going to curve this around into a little smile. And then from here, I'll curve around to about even with where I started the first one. Okay? So now we need to connect these two pieces. I'm going to connect them with a simple curve, just like that. Next, I am going to put an eye by making a circle, and then a circle, and then a circle and a circle. Such a cute little eye. So, of course, if you have a special way that you like to make eyes, or your kids like to make eyes, then you go right ahead. Next, we're going to work on the outline of the body shape. So I'm going to do, just make some waves on it, just for fun. And then as I get to there, so it's wave down, wave down, wave down, and around curve. From here, we're going to make our tail curve in just like this. So this almost looks like a 6, right? And if you want it to be even curvier, you can bring it in a little bit more. From here, we're going to follow our curve back out and up. Now, if you're using a pencil, you could easily continue this line across and then draw the legs. But since I'm using a Sharpie for your sake, so you can be able to see what I'm drawing, I'm going to pause my line here, draw my 2 legs, and then I'll continue the line. So the legs are going to be a curve and a curve, and then I'm going to do a diagonal, V, diagonal, diagonal. So there's one leg. Then we'll do the back leg the same way. Curve, curve, diagonal, V, diagonal. Then we're going to continue this line that I was drawing earlier all the way across. Now right now our cute little guy is just floating in the air, and we don't want that. So let's draw a branch, or if you have a better idea, maybe your chameleon is standing on something else. Maybe it's standing on a tower or a car or a house or another animal. So you can have so much fun thinking about where your little chameleon is and then creating that object for them. So there's my branch. I might even want to add a little bit of kind of wood and texture in there. And then from here, we might want to add some leaves, right? So I might have a curve flip, a curve like a frown, and a curve like a smile almost. You could draw the veins in there, just like that. And then we might have another leaf and another leaf. There we go. You can add even more to your background if you want to. You could even have had his little tongue sticking out. Maybe there's a little fly on the end. So have fun with this. There's 2 more lines we need to draw right in here. We have a leg and a leg that's on the other side of the body that we can't see, right? Now, from here, you could either start painting. So you draw with pencil and then maybe trace with pen, Sharpie, or any other kind of permanent marker, something that's not going to budge whenever it gets wet. I think it looks really nice to trace your pencil lines with something permanent. Then from there, you can go in with, only if you want to, then you can go straight into painting with your liquid watercolors. Or instead of tracing with something permanent, you could always trace with oil pastels or crayons. They are waxy, right? So they will create this barrier that is almost like a wall for your paint, and it will resist the water. Oil pastels and crayons are water resistant. They push away anything that's liquid that we put on top. So I might go red, and then I might create an orange section. Just like that. And then we might have yellow. And have a little yellow section going on. And then we might have green. And then I might have a darker green. And then I might have blue and purple, because it is 𝘀𝗵𝗱𝘆, right? And then I could start it over again. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and I know I skipped the light green. I wanted to make sure I had enough room on here to squeeze my colors in one more time. And purple. Then, this little leg right here. I almost forgot him. Okay. Then you might want to work on your branch, right? So, and I don't think I made a brown watercolor. So what I'm going to do is I am going to outline all this texture just like this with the brown, and then maybe even color just a little bit on there with the oil pastel. Now the harder you push, the more water resistant your colors will be, and the softer you push, the paint might kind of cover that up, but that's okay. At least now we have a fill of brown on there, right? Then I might use some dark green in my leaves, just like that. Maybe a little dark green here. I might use a little light green, just like that. And then I might do, ooh, here's a fun purple. Maybe do a little purple. Oop, trace my little curve lines around the eyes. Go ahead and color in my pupil. If it's a small area, sometimes it's a good idea to use the oil pastels to color it in, because you could potentially get out of the lines with the paint. So now we have our color on here. We outlined everything. If there's anything extra that you might want to add in here, now is your time. And then to paint this, the smaller the area, the smaller the brush you might want to use. The bigger the area, maybe a little bigger. And then if you have an even bigger area, such as the background, you could use an even bigger brush. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to get my water cup handy, because even though we're using watercolor paints, we still have to clean our brush in between each color. So I've got my brush all cleaned up, or my water cup ready, and I am going to dip into my red paint. And everywhere that I want red, I am going to go ahead and paint it in. So remember, this is just a red Crayola marker that really wasn't working so well anymore. And we put a little bit of water in the bottom of a cup or a container. And this was 2 red markers that drained overnight. And what's kind of cool is it drains a lot of the ink out of the marker tip. So see, it's a lot lighter than what it used to be. Also, eventually it'll drain all the color out of the marker and that tip goes white. Now sometimes the kids will try to use the marker to color with, and that's okay, especially if they're smaller. Sometimes their fine motor skills aren't quite as developed enough to be able to use a paintbrush, so using that marker is fine. They're going to have fun and they're just going to create. So to clean my brush goes all the way to the bottom and it becomes a ballerina, and we push and swirl in the cup. No tap dancing, because you will splash water. Instead, we just wipe, 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 wipe. Okay? Then you could dry your brush, but you really don't need to, because you're about to stick it into some more wet liquid. I'll get into my orange paint this time and start getting my orange filled in. The orange is not as dark as what I would like it, and that's because it had a little bit more water in it, I think, than the other colors did. Or maybe these orange markers were more dried out than I thought they were. So that's okay though. You can always, if you don't like the color, you can always put another orange marker in there and it'll darken it up. And definitely use just a little bit of water in the bottom of your cup. If you use a lot of water in the bottom of your cup when you're making your colors, it's not going to work. It'll just be way too thin of a color and it won't even be noticeable. Now this yellow, I'm really interested to see how it turns out. I had accidentally grabbed a laser lemon yellow, so I think, oh yeah. It's going to be pretty bright, but that's okay. That's really fun. So it shows you right here, you could use your neon markers and make neon watercolor paints. And yes, they do make neon markers. And they make neon oil pastels, neon crayons, neon color pencils. I will say the neon oil pastels work really great and look super cool under a black light. We've done black light shows at my school. So right here we are I forgot to paint that little area. Now before I move on to my green, while I still have the yellow in my brush, I am going to go ahead and paint the green section yellow first. And I know you're like, what is she doing? But that's because I want it to look like a lighter green, right? So we get that laser lemon yellow on there. Now I can dip into my green paint, put that right on top, and it looks pretty light. I'm almost wondering if my green brush or my green markers were a little dried out too much as well, because they're kind of light. But again, that's okay. You just pop another green marker in there, let it sit for another couple hours, you're good to go. You'll have a darker color. Now, this is straight green. So this is the difference between putting the yellow underneath it first to make my own lime green versus just using the straight green from the container. So again, the green is kind of light. It's pretty, but if you want it darker, then you need to add another green marker to it. And really, if you get 4 markers in there, if you happen to have 4 markers that are dried out, and you put that in your cup all together with just a little bit of water at the bottom, you're going to have a great color. Okay, now I am going to get into the blue paint. So this is my blue liquid watercolor that I made. And blue right there. So there's not very much blue. And that's another thing too is, ooh, we could make kind of a turquoise maybe. Another thing is too that you can, I'm just playing here with my color a little. Another thing is that you can paint it once and then go over and put a second coat on. Anytime you put a second coat of paint on anything, it's going to make it look more bold and intense. Now this is the purple. Very pretty. There we go. And let's see, maybe purple on the eye and blue. The softer you touch your paintbrush to your paper, the thinner the brush stroke is going to be. The harder you push that brush down, the thicker your brush stroke will be. So you might think about that. So now I'm going to go ahead and do, let's try this black. I've learned that the black doesn't always look black. Sometimes it will almost have a little bit of a turquoise feel, which is pretty cool. But that's decently black. So I'm painting over my branch because I didn't have a brown. So I'm painting over my branch with the black color that I made. If you have any oopsies and you get some paint in the wrong area, all you have to do is take your napkin or your finger and just wipe it off real quick. There's no reason to stress. If you use your napkin, you can kind of wipe it or dab it to soak up that color. There we go. There. Okay. So we got our branch on there. And then the last thing we have to do is our sky. And you could have fun with your sky color. Like I could do some blue in here and kind of spread that around. And I am still just using my pointy brush, but I could have switched to my bigger brush. Okay, now I'm going to get a little bit of purple, sort of mix that in. That's fun. Now you have to be really careful if you paint one. If you paint wet watercolor next to another color that's still wet, sometimes they will bleed together and mix. So if you don't want that to happen, you have to let certain areas dry before you paint next to them. But that's another reason why using the oil pastels to trace is great, because it's like I almost created a little teeny tiny wall up around all of my things that I drew, so that the color will not get into the different areas unless I get too crazy with my paintbrush. When I hold my paintbrush, I like to hold it right where the metal and the handle touch. You have the most control right there. The softer the touch, the thinner the brush stroke. The harder the touch, the thicker the brush stroke. And I'm using the side of the bristles right now to paint this in so that I can fill more space at one time. If I were just using the tip, it would make a really thin brush stroke like that. So I'll get this filled in. Another cool technique that you can do is, while your colors are still wet, you can actually sprinkle just some good old table salt on any area that you want it to look like it's got a little texture going on. So for example, on that tree trunk, while the black was still wet, I could have easily sprinkled a little bit of salt on there and gave it a really cool texture. And then you just let the salt sit, and as it dries, you'll see what I'm talking about. Now down here, I could maybe, let's see, just grab a little bit of black, kind of darken up my purple a little, just a little bit. There we go. Just a smidge. There. Kind of squiggle that brush around. I might even grab just a little bit of blue. Put just a little bit of that blue back in there. Blue and purple mixed together makes indigo, which is really pretty. Now, the more liquid you put on your paper, the less it's going to be able to hold it, and it's going to really start to curl up on you. So if it does that, like I said, after it dries, you can lay some heavy books or something heavy on top of it to kind of get it to flatten back out. So that, my friends, is my I Draw, You Draw Chameleon that we traced with Sharpie, or you could totally trace with crayons or oil pastel, something that is water resistant. And we traced all of our lines with that, and then we went back with our homemade liquid watercolor paints that we made by mixing just a little bit of water with some markers. Now I put 2 markers in each cup with this amount of water, probably a little too much water. So if you only have 1 marker, you want to just put a tiny bit of water in the bottom and then go from there. You can always add a little bit more water to kind of dilute your colors if you need to. So I hope that you enjoyed this lesson with me. I had a lot of fun drawing and painting with you. I hope that you're able to work this project with your kids and that they have a lot of fun and are successful with their outcome. Remember, everyone's their own special artist, and just let them have fun and experiment, right? That's what it's all about. Making our heart feel good, clearing our minds, and just having a great time. I can't wait to paint with you guys. And make sure and tag us on social media so we can see your finished product. I want to see some little chameleons all over the internet. So make sure and tag at Artsy Rose Academy. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.